discussion of today's topic.
Yep.
May Allah bless his soul, Shaheed Malik al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, also popularly colloquially known as Malcolm X.
Yep.
His tatfeen was led, his Salat al-Mayyat was led by a Shia alim.
Absolutely. And I think the reason why, again, to bring it all together, I think
Hmm.
a good segue into our discussion
Hmm.
is that recently, the birth anniversary of the great
Yeah, yesterday,
Malcolm
yeah.
X, so
Yeah.
yesterday actually,
Hmm.
May 19th,
Yeah.
was, I saw a lot of posts about him.
Hmm.
So I wanted to have this discussion with you since you've been here
Hmm.
more than I have. Like, you've basically been living here for all your life, right?
Basically, yeah.
Right. So all of
Hmm.
that, about the culture and
Hmm.
Muslims, and basically this is your world.
Yeah.
For me, it's slightly different because I come from subcontinent and Pakistan, a very different you know ideals and different
Hmm.
heroes that we have and possess over there, and different problems as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I come from a world where religious coexistence is a huge issue, right? So
Hmm.
वो तो हमारा तो एक different problem है. तो हमारे heroes were, the likes of Talib Jori and
Yeah.
Rashid Turabis and all of
Hmm.
these Nadeem Server. These guys were our religious heroes, if you
Heroes,
like,
yeah.
right? People who became larger than life for our
Hmm.
community, and
Hmm.
basically represented us the best way.
Hmm.
So obviously, Muslims in the United States had different
Hmm.
heroes, and Joe, look, someone like me
Well,
looking from afar,
mhm.
um, they've always been this I would say very basic understanding of these heroes like
Yeah.
Malcolm X की एक बड़ी basic understanding है.
Mhm.
And ever since I moved here, I've been really intrigued and interested about this guy, and
Mhm.
especially with the whole
Yeah.
the socialist or democratic socialist movement
Mhm.
began over here. A lot of references have been made to Malcolm X and the great Dr. King. Though I've been more intrigued to learn about what their thoughts were, what their influences were, and obviously another huge player in that region, or in that timeline of Malcolm X and Dr. King, was Muhammad Ali, right?
The
So
champ.
the champ, right? The champ
Yeah,
has
the champ.
been known really well in Pakistan. I remember
He is
my grandparents.
probably
Yeah, probably the
the 20th century, the most famous Muslim man in the 20th century, and
hands
the
down. I
greatest
can't
of all
think of it.
time. Yeah.
Absolutely, I can't think of any.
And and do you know how Muhammad Ali became Muslim? Who brought him to
No,
Islam?
no.
Malcolm X. Shaheed Malcolm X brought him to Islam.
Oh right, yeah, yeah, exactly. You're right. Absolutely right. तो जो एक हमें एक जो connection था ना American Muslim से, it was
Mhm.
always kind of like from afar, it seemed like a very cultural movement as opposed to a religious movement, right? Religion was in the background. Even for Malcolm X, like looking from outside in, it's
Mhm.
always been like he's there fighting a political cause or a social cause more than a
Mhm. Exactly.
religious cause. But
Mhm.
you know, obviously both of them cannot be separate because the
Exactly.
religion
His
was the
in the words
base.
of
Ah,
in the words of Ayatollah Khomeini, Islam is politics. Islam is,
absolutely.
and that's what it is.
There's no way it can be separated. So
Yeah.
again, going back to Muhammad Ali, I think
Mhm.
like to my surprise, my grandmother, may Allah bless her soul, was never like a sports person. Maybe India
Mhm.
Pakistan ka cricket match kabhi dekh leti thi, but even she watched the great battles that Muhammad Ali
Mhm.
had with the Thrill in Manila, and like
Yeah.
Pakistan used to stop, like stand still पे आ जाता when they were like late night होते थे ये जो bouts
Mhm.
होते थे, they were
Exactly.
always late night, right? क्योंकि either US में हो रहे हैं या East Far East में कहीं हो रहा है,
Mhm.
whatever, कहीं Africa में हो रहा है.
Exactly.
So the timeline would have been very odd.
Mhm.
Like, people used to take time out because they had this ownership towards him. I think I think he came to Pakistan as well some point in time after he retired,
Mhm.
and went all across the Muslim world as well. I think he went to Iran briefly as well,
Mhm.
if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. So the this connection
Actually,
with
there's a very
American.
famous picture of him at the shrine of Imam Hussein
Oh
in
yeah, yeah,
Karbala.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've seen that one. So there's always been this understanding of American Muslims that okay, almost like alien, right? They never
Mhm.
really, because, and the
It's a
reason why
very
is that
yeah.
nobody could categorize them because we come from a world where we have to bucket someone, like he's a Shia,
Mhm.
he's a Sunni, he's a Barelvi, he's a Deobandi, And
Hmm.
these guys were always like, no, we're Muslims, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
They were never, you
Even
would
the
never
black
be.
Shias in the United States, a lot of them, they are very fluid in their, interminglings. They have, a lot of Sunni relatives, right?
Oh yeah,
Or even non-Muslim relatives for that matter.
absolutely. Though I think it's a good opportunity for me and everybody else to learn about this great Muslim,
Yeah,
I would say,
definitely.
knight or scholar or
I,
uh,
in my opinion,
leader.
he is a leader, right? He is the leader for the Muslim movement in the West. I think there's no doubt about it. You can ask any learned person within the Sunni and Shia schools in the West, they will claim Malcolm X as their own,
Yeah, and they do.
and rightfully so.
Hmm.
The thing with Malcolm X, right? To me, like recently, I was reading. Someone was sharing how Malcolm X has his story reminds him of Imam Hussein, right? To me, he reminds me less of Imam Hussein. I mean, yes, the leadership aspect, but to me, he has that redemptive arc that Hur had.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Please
So
shed some light on that. That would
yeah,
be
yeah.
interesting.
So one thing I highly recommend, especially to those of your listeners who may be interested in this, this black Muslim guy that we're talking about, Malcolm X. This is his autobiography that he co-wrote with Alex Haley. Highly
Oh, love to
recommend
read that.
this. Yeah. And if you are not much of a reader, because I know a lot of people they do not have time to read, but this is a great book to understand the in the martyr's own words what
Yeah.
he believed. And this was published shortly after his death, so he knew that his time was short when this was written. There's a very famous movie by Spike Lee called Malcolm X, which is actually based
Hmm.
on his autobiography. So I highly recommend that,
Yep.
with Denzel Washington playing the titular character of Shahid Malcolm X.
Hmm.
And so the story of Malcolm X starts with, first of all, his parents, right? Like they were Garveyist. Garvey, I don't know if you're familiar with Marcus Garvey. He was a African American or an African American leader, we can say, or a Negro leader because he wasn't technically African American. He was from Jamaica,
Jamaican,
but
right? Yeah.
yeah, the Jamaican Jamaican leader who,
He was an activist. Yeah.
yes, he was an activist who called for the liberation of the black people in the
Hmm.
United States, and he called for them to migrate back to Africa.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
he wasn't he the one who had this organization as well.
Yes, UNIA, Universal
UNIA, yeah,
I,
Negro Improvement Association or something.
Association. Yes, yes, and um, Malcolm Little, as he was known back then, his parents were very involved in this, and his father was a minister as well. And when Malcolm, I forget exactly how old he was. I think he was a young boy, because he had
Hmm.
several siblings, by the way. Uh, the When his family was living, I want to say Tennessee. I think it was
Hmm.
Tennessee. I could be wrong, but double check. Uh, or I think it might have been Detroit. He was born in Detroit, and his one of his nicknames was Detroit Red because he had very reddish hair. But anyways, when he was a young boy, the Ku
Born in
Klux
Omaha, actually, it says.
Omaha,
That's
yes, Omaha, Nebraska, yes, that's right.
yep.
And I think he was but he grew up in partially in Detroit, so he got the nickname Detroit Red.
Yes, that is correct. Yep, I'm
Yes,
just reading up on that.
yeah, no, for sure. Please
Relocated,
do find.
So he relocated to in 1926 to Milwaukee and then shortly to Lansing, Michigan.
Yes, Lansing, Michigan. That's where his father, the Ku Klux Klan, came, and they burned the cross and they lynched his father. He was a little boy.
Wow.
Uh, he was born, I think, in 1925. So, and I think this is we're talking like late 20s, early 30s. So, like he was a 4 or 5 year old kid
This
too.
was in
And
between the First and the Second World War, right?
yes, yes, yes. And interestingly enough, when this happened, his mother, who had several little kids, rightfully so, had a mental breakdown because her support was gone.
Yep.
literally in the brink of an eye. And then this is when the siblings split up, and he eventually went and lived with his older half sister, who, in her own right, is a great civil rights leader. And I forget her name. If you want to Google her real quick, if you have
Mhm.
Wikipedia open, it should say her name on there.
Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
Something
it's.
Little. I think it might be Eloise. Eloise Little, or that might be his mother. I think. I'm not sure.
But yeah, you continue. I'm looking
Yeah.
at it right now.
So, and he
Ella Little Collins.
yes, Ella
Little,
Collins. Yes,
yeah.
Ella Little Collins was a huge figure in her life, and but Malcolm, young Malcolm, he got into all sorts of trouble, and he at one point was a male prostitute. Most people don't know that. Now think about it. Coming from the culture that we do, if we find out, some alim right, or some religious figure is like that,
One of our heroes, for
one
example,
of our heroes, right? Like
had a history
imagine
like that. Yeah.
finding out, like something equivalent to that is finding out that, and most people don't know this, that Qaeda Azam was muhammadali Jinnah used to be a Shakespearean actor,
Even
or
though that's not
yeah,
like that's not.
or he used to drink or eat pork,
Yeah,
even as
yeah,
a
yeah,
Muslim, right? So
yeah.
it's a shocker. Like, no, like that, we don't want it.
No, nah.
But that's part of his redemptive arc, right? And then,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, he had a white girlfriend, and he got arrested because Loving v. Virginia had not happened, which allows for interracial marriage and interracial relationships in the United States.
Yeah.
So interracial
Just
relationships were
last
illegal.
century, guys. Not even like 100 years ago.
50 years ago. That's
This
50
is
years, 52
insane.
years ago.
Insane, right?
That's like not even our parents' age. That's like our older cousins. Like, that's my older brothers. All four of my older brothers were born before that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, and that happened. So he went to jail, but he was very bookish. Even as a kid, he wanted to be a lawyer,
Hmm.
but he was discouraged by his white teachers. But he was a very bright student. So when he went to jail, he started reading, and I think he came across the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. And you cannot have a discussion about Shaheed Malcolm X without talking about Elijah Muhammad and his notorious organization
The
known as the
Nation of
Nation
Islam.
of Islam. And see, the thing is, we in the West, as immigrant Muslims, do not know other sects in Islam, right? We
Yeah.
just think Shia Sunni. No, the Nation of Islam is a sect,
That's
right?
the thing. Why? You know what? That's what happened when I remember when I was in school studying a lot about Dr. King and
Mhm,
Malcolm X. I think
mhm,
this is what I feel like was an off-putting point in my, like, I would say, innocent
mhm.
growing up years, where I was like, this is why I think a lot of Muslims back home in Pakistan and in India, in that region, don't really own Malcolm X to that extent, even Muhammad Ali to that extent, that because they feel like, yeah, he's a Muslim, but I don't know, kaun sa wala Muslim hai? Like,
And
they can't relate to him, right? Because they're like,
exactly, and
what is the Nation of Islam, like, right?
yeah,
So wake off-putting
it is an
issues out.
off-putting thing, but that, I think, has more to do with our own ignorance
Yeah.
than with the reality. Because we have to understand, like, Islam didn't come to the West or to the United States the way it came to India and to the Middle East, right? Where Muslims came as these winning armies, or these invading armies, that
or
conquering armies, that
immigrants or immigrants, right?
all immigrants, yeah.
Or
But they,
basically, you get India. Mein, just to pause you right there, India
yeah,
and neighboring countries. There were
mhm.
obviously, yes, that whole aspect of you know conquest and all of that, but there were also aspect of people moving around, as we
Yeah,
know,
they were. So what
like
I meant by that,
people from the time of what's his name.
from the time of the
Uh,
Holy Prophet
no, yeah,
himself,
even after that, I think वो जो
yeah,
एक कौन वो था यार जिसकी वजह
Muhammad
से
bin
लाइक
Qasim,
मोहम्मद बिन कासिम का अंकल क्या नाम था उसका
or Hajjaj bin Yusuf,
Hajjat
Lanatullah
Hajjat
alayh.
Latullah. So during his time, a lot of
Yeah,
the
the Sadat moved
family
there.
Sadat moved to India and
Yeah, I
this
mean
region,
Abdullah
right?
Shah Ghazi, the
Yeah,
famous story of Abdullah Shah Ghazi, because
yeah.
what most sorry for digression, but most
Nah,
Pakistanis they literally consider his killer one of the greatest, the first Muslim Pakistani, and it's like, no, Muhammad Qasim was a murderer and a
Yeah,
agent of the state. He was
absolutely.
state-sponsored terrorist
Yeah,
who was a
yeah,
womanizer who went and raped and pillaged in Multan, and it got so bad that Hajjaj, his uncle, basically had to have him killed.
exactly. और ये सब चीज़ें, like this is again history. If you go to
Mm,
rural Sindh,
hmm.
and these people will give you that information because this is
Exactly,
coming from their family generation से ये चीज़ उनके
exactly.
families के अंदर ये रही है क्योंकि they hate
The
uh,
conquest,
the conquest. Yeah,
conquest.
absolutely.
Yeah.
हाँ, तो वो नहीं देखते वो, हालांकि वो खुद भी मुसलमान है, but they don't give a
Exactly.
shit about Hajjaj bin Yusuf or Muhammad
Yeah,
Qasim.
and
But
that's why
anyway,
they interior sin is Shia for that reason.
oh yeah, yeah, very Molai, yeah.
Yeah, but my point in that was that even still, right? The when these people immigrated, right, to India or to the west, to the east, right, for instance, or even in Africa,
Hmm.
they weren't going to a land where they were a complete minority, or they were a privileged minority.
Yeah,
They were able to settle, they were able to practice their religion and get in touch with other aspects of their religion. They were able to practice their religion and be able to be this, more than just, another cog in the wheel.
right.
Islam in the West is not how, that's not how it spread, right? Especially if you look at, Islam came to the West with the African slaves from
Yeah,
West Africa.
completely different race
Yeah,
right off the bat.
yeah. Race is different, and more than that, the situation, right? Like
Yeah.
there were I think there's, I forget, there's a guy named Abu Bakr or something. He was a prince in one of the tribes. He was the tribal chief,
Hmm.
and he was captured and brought as a slave. And so Islam did not come here as this with a pompous like entourage. It came literally in the backbones, or the
Yeah,
back seats.
yeah.
So for and then there was that whole forced conversion into Christianity aspect by the European colonizers
Hmm.
to destroy their link back to their mother country, which is
Hmm.
Africa, to because that's part of breaking the human being, right? So when Nation of Islam exists, yes, as Muslims we can say we do not agree with Nation of Islam as a their views, but we have to understand this was a people trying to rediscover their roots. And there are problems, and but the thing is, a lot of credit has to be given to Nation of Islam for the spread of Islam and whatever positive view that has come from Islam.
Absolutely, I
Because
agree. I think what एक similar हमारी एक discussion हुई थी इसके ऊपर
mhm,
कि pluralistic thought in
yes,
Islam and in different sects of Islam, but generally in
exactly.
Islam, pluralistic thought is imperative, right? Because we come
Exactly.
from a point where we look at things in binaries, कि या Shia या Sunni, or
Mhm,
black or white, right? तो
mhm,
एक pluralism इसमें like thought के ऊपर इतना important है because I can coexist with a person with different ideologies and different
mhm,
mindset without having to feel like yeah, I'm compromising on my own, right? Because
mhm,
that doesn't actually mean that way. और यही
mhm.
हमारी डिस्कशन अभी जो हो
Exactly.
रही थी व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप पे वो इसी इसी चीज के
Exactly.
ऊपर हुई थी कि learning how to understand that there are multiple ways of thinking and multiple ways of comprehending issues. You
Mhm.
may not agree with them, right?
Exactly.
The whole Islamic point of view of African Americans over here in the US, you can
Mhm,
disagree with the nuances of like yeah ये फिक्र ही ये ठीक नहीं है or whatever.
mhm,
You can you can do all of that, but at the end of the day,
mhm.
this is a reality. This is एक
Exactly.
मुसल्लमा एक सच्चाई है ये
Mhm,
कि these people are here. They were here
mhm,
before us.
mhm,
So if anybody has a say on the social fabric of the United States, it should be
mhm.
them.
Exactly.
And if anybody should have some sort of an ownership in terms of leading Muslims in this region, in
It
my
has to
opinion, it
be.
should be them.
Yeah, it should be, and exactly right. Like, I think, and talking to Sheikh Hussein Makki from Colorado, I think that's one of the things that uh, we want to change is this. It's not an immigrant versus indigenous Muslim issue. We have to understand that we as immigrants, we are one, model minorities. Two,
Yep.
we've only been here like since the 70s,
Yeah.
right? Thanks to the work of civil rights leaders like Malcolm X, right?
Yep. Yep.
And other, Muslim and non-Muslim African American and other, civil rights leaders who literally gave their life for us to be here,
Yeah.
right? And unfortunately, while we reap the benefits and the rewards, they're the ones footing the bill to this day.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, continuing the story of Malcolm X. So he came across, the teachings of Elijah
Elijah.
Muhammad, and yeah, and he started writing letters to him, and then he embraced Islam during the his imprisonment, and there's a very beautiful scene in the movie Malcolm X where he's able to. He was so well read and so eloquent that he made the prison guards just he shut them up. He shut up the prison warden, and then
Who plays Malcolm X in that movie, by the way?
Denzel
Do you know?
Washington.
Oh, Denzel
Denzel,
does.
yeah. So imagine, I mean,
Wow.
Denzel's an amazing actor,
Oh
and
yeah,
I,
yeah. I
I
can
mean,
only. I haven't seen the movie, and I'm already like dying to see it.
it's amazing. It came out in 1992, I think, or
Wow.
94, something like that. It's a phenomenal movie. I highly recommend it. Um,
I'll definitely watch it.
yeah, I mean, he does not look like Malcolm X, but oh my God, he does an amazing job of delivering Malcolm X's, image. And so, Malcolm X, once he got out, he quickly moved to the ranks of the Nation of Islam. And
Mm-hmm.
the Nation of Islam is a very well organized organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, he became basically the spokesperson.
Very elite as well. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, very elite. They are highly educated and they're actually doing the work, right? Like you want to talk about, khidmat al khalq, right? Like
hmm,
they're servicing the people within जो inner cities में हैं, Chicago में, Oakland में, आपके, downtown Houston, and that's you want to do tabligh, like don't do tablighi jamaat and ये majlis matam. That's how you bring people to Islam.
I think that's a very important point, and also like इसी point पे मुझे एक चीज bring up करनी पड़ेगी. I don't know if you saw the recent discoveries of the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter की जो
Some, uh,
finances
yeah,
finances अब सामने आए हैं.
mhm,
And that's what makes me sad, right? When you hear about the way movements were led in the
mhm.
60s and the 50s and the 70s, and all this time,
उस-
and then you
उसका
see
आई हैव
this.
मेरा कमेंट है उसके ऊपर. एंड ये जब BLM शुरू हुई थी ना, ये जब ही
Hmm.
मैंने ये कमेंट किया था इन द 2016 2017 time frame that the problem with ये movement fail हो रही है और ये fail होगी, and the reason it's going to fail is it does not have a solid leadership.
Yeah.
आपको पता ही नहीं था कि कौन भाई इंचार्ज कौन है.
Or in charts is other like
And because the reason I
yeah.
say knowing who's in charge, to put a name to to a face, like having a name, right, or having a
Yep.
face, is there can be accountability.
Yep. Exactly. अब
अब
यानी कि आप
आप
किसके पीछे भागोगे? हाँ, अब अगर
yeah,
जो ये सब निकला है, who are you gonna like stop?
exactly. ये क्यों निकला है? Because the reason ये निकला है because they there was no coherence of this, right? You don't have a leadership, a national leadership. SNCC, I'm not sure if you're familiar with SNCC. This is the Southern, I forget, it's SNCC or SCNC, something of the sort.
Mm-hmm.
Southern Congress. It's basically was the organization that Dr. King led, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people like Dr. King, James Farmer Jr., um, Otis Redding, Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, these W.E.B. Du Bois, these were people who may not have been exactly part of the same organizations, but the movement, the civil rights movement, just like the Black Lives Matter movement,
Yep.
you knew who these people were. You could pinpoint, right? And unfortunately, like you talk to BLM folks, and their counter argument is, Oh, look, what did they do to Dr. King? What did they do to Malcolm X? They killed him because they knew who the leadership were. But that's the thing, right?
So I
That's
mean, the
that's the
sad
double-edged
reality
sword.
is exactly that's real. If you are admittingly standing up against the status quo, and you admittingly are standing up against the system, what do you
Mhm.
think? Like they're gonna throw flowers
That,
at
no,
you?
yeah, nobody wants to give up the power.
Yeah.
You
So
you
it
are
means
you
कि
are
आप
speaking
भी
to the power. Yeah,
exactly. So if you're speaking to the power, there's no history of the power
I
saying,
mean,
"Oh, you know what?
yeah,
You've changed my mind. I'm gonna be better." No, that's
exactly.
not the
I
history.
mean, I'll give you a simple but funny example. If you see your dad doing something wrong,
Hmm.
you stand up to him. You know, 9 times out of 10, ek jhaapad aa raha hai. Like,
Exactly.
what do you think your dad's gonna be like? If your dad's did we have a connection issue? I think.
Yeah, I think you dropped off.
Oh, snap.
Very
Well, I'm
briefly.
back. Yeah. Okay. So if we have something like that, आप जाके अपने parents को कहें नहीं अब्बू आप ये नहीं कह सकते. Dad's not gonna be like, no, you know what, son, तुम सही कह रहे हो.
You've changed my
I,
heart. Yeah, yeah.
yes,
You've
nobody's
opened
gonna
my
do that.
eyes.
Now take that to you're not only saying that you, the government, or you, the people in power, are wrong. You're saying we want you to make these changes, and these
Radical
changes,
changes.
radical changes, and they're gonna come at the expense of your power and your authority and your control of the material wealth.
Yep.
Nobody's gonna agree to that.
Yep.
आपने पाकिस्तान में देख लिया इमरान खान साहब ने जाके जो है आंखें दिखाई भाजपा साहब को क्या किया उन्होंने.
Like, say. So that's the thing, right? You एक
Mm,
double edged sword. That's why either when you are in like the state के, which is why I think के modern अगर movement अगर आपको देखनी है over the last
mm,
1400 years, so I think,
mm.
and this is not me saying it because I am part of that quote unquote movement, but I think Shia Islam is kind of like a movement, right?
It is a movement. It is.
It
I
is
mean, from the very get go,
a very
from
good goal, right? Like
we start.
Saqifa
I
hai.
mean, even Islam. I mean, even Shia Islam. We can even go back to before Saqifa, right?
Yeah,
We go back. Rasulullah started a political movement. What did they try to do to Rasulullah? Why did he
absolutely.
leave Mecca? Like, do you think he wanted to leave Mecca? That was his home.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
literally had to leave in the middle of the night because they sent 40 men from each tribe to kill him. 40 tribes got together and they put their aim was to kill Muhammad. All these battles, what was the goal? They were not
Is
trying
to
to.
kill Muhammad. Yeah,
Yeah,
this was not a power battle. Like
yeah.
if we win, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. Like we're gonna like
And
have
I
control
think
of the land. But it was more to kill. Like it was a personality issue as well. Yeah,
because
they can't
and
be
and
two
and what
chefs,
Rasul
right?
exactly, but what Rasulullah did beautifully, right, is he said you can kill Muhammad, but you can't kill Muhammadism.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
what that meant was, and yes, as Shias will say, oh, Imam Ali Kona. No, not just Imam Ali.
Yeah.
He had left a network of agents, of Sahabis, right? True Sahabis. I mean,
Hmm.
and people like Abu Zar Ghafari, who, in place of Rasulullah in the time of the on the third Khalifa,
But or it was
the third,
exiled.
he was why was he exiled? He was making social justice arguments. He was saying that you're taking from Baitul Mal. This is not
Standing
your
up to the
right.
power. Yeah,
It's
standing up to the
speaking truth
power.
to the power.
Yep. So that was
And here's
that was the
and that
BLM of
that
the time, if
30
you like.
that 25-year period, right, before Imam Ali comes into Zahiri Khilafat. If you look at it, Imam Ali is not like he's publicly active and doing things, but he's not the one standing up front and fighting and making these calls. It's people like Abu Dhar al-Ghafari, like the Muazzin of Rasulullah, Hazrat Bilal, right?
Yep.
Talk. You want to talk about BLM?
Yeah.
Want to talk about a black man? He being the Muazzin, people don't understand. Back in the day, the Muazzin, you are the announcement. You are the
The
क्या कहते हैं,
face. You're the
you are
face.
the face. You are the spokesperson for Rasulullah. And he was so disgusted by this new administration that had come in after
Hmm.
the demise of the Holy Prophet that he refused to publicly do azan.
Yeah. And these are all realities,
These are
but
realities. So yeah.
exactly. So I think movement when you going back to like Malcolm X and BLM, I think movement movements का यही एक समझ लो कि you know correctly
A
mentioned, it's a
movement
double
will
edged sword,
fall.
right?
The
Movement
problem
is
is
for you, not for you. आपके लिए नहीं
Mhm.
हो रही है. It's
Yeah,
for your generation, or and you
it
have to kind of
yeah,
understand, either you
it's
will die
yeah,
naturally in the in
or
the
you're gonna be
pursuit of
killed.
this, or you're going to be killed.
Yeah, and the thing is, the movement is beyond you, right? And it's not like you said, it's not you, it's the movement, right? And I think Malcolm X also did this beautifully, right? When he cut from Nation of Islam, why did he cut from Nation of Islam? And if you watch the movie, he talks about it, or read the books, and it's actually on the internet.
Yeah.
Elijah Muhammad was having extramarital affairs with his secretaries, and they were becoming pregnant, and then he was paying for their abortions. And these women, and he was threatening them. And these women went to his right hand man, Malcolm X, and complained to him. And then when Malcolm X went to confront Elijah Muhammad did not deny this. And then that's what he had, a crisis of conscience. I can fall in line, or, here I'm talking about black people being oppressed by the white people, but here we have a black leader, a Muslim
Impressive.
leader who
Yeah.
is oppressing. And, so am I just speaking truth to power when it's the white man, or am I willing to speak truth to power for all people? And
Yep.
that's why he broke from there. And then he went on the Hajj, the famous Hajj, where he, famously said, I saw Muslims of all colors, all praising Allah. And then he went on a tour to, through Africa and the Middle East. He even went to Iran. He was a state guest of the Shah of Iran at the time.
Hmm.
And then he came to the United States, and he started Muslim mosquing. And unfortunately, in 1965, a mere year after he had made his famous um, pilgrimage and his infamous break from the Nation of Islam, he was gunned down, uh, making a speech and
Yeah.
speaking up against injustice.
I think one thing I also wanted to clarify with you, since kind of like an expert on this, but I wanted to
I'm no
understand.
expert. I'm just
No, I mean, you are. I mean, you know more about the subject more than I do. So I wanted
Mhm,
to also take this opportunity to learn. I think one thing that I've also seen from an outside perspective is that both Malcolm X and Dr. King are presented as these two alternatives of how to lead a movement and how to bring on change to the social structure, right?
mhm,
Whenever we talk about BLM, whenever we talk about any of the rights movements, right?
mhm,
There's always like this is we are presented with these two options that hey, you can do this the Malcolm X way, or you can do this the Dr. King way. Sometimes it has underlying religious biases
yeah,
attached to it,
yeah.
because Dr. King is a
A Christian leader,
Christian
yes.
leader, and obviously a lot of the Christians over here would gravitate towards him. And
Uh,
Malcolm X is notoriously sometimes painted as this
the angry,
rebel.
in his own words, the angriest black man in America.
Yeah, exactly,
But
a rebel, and someone who doesn't, who's not smart enough to like
yeah.
play the system with it, like
So,
bring
but
the
that's
change
the
from
thing,
within,
right?
right?
Like, one of the things. Let me stop you right there, because I think I get your question.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think one
Go
of the
ahead.
issues th- that we have is, again, it's the powers that be that are playing this whole Martin versus Malcolm game, right? The thing is, the image that we are presented in the West of Dr. King is a very sanitized image. Okay,
Hmm.
he was a womanizer. First of all, he had very loose morals as a person. That besides that, he did not become a threat to the powers that be. When he was talking about black people's the rights of black people, he was fine. Letter of Birmingham, from Birmingham jail, beautifully written, beautifully written letter. Okay, I recommend anyone who is a peace activist or wants to be a peace activist to read that. When did they kill Dr. King? Do you know?
64.
No, they killed him in '68 or
68, sorry.
60. Yeah, '68. He no 60 no 60 no '69. Sorry, '68, '69, something like that. He was in
68, 68, April
'68.
4th.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
April
was in
4th, my
10.
4th, my
Yeah,
last name.
April 4th, 1968. He
Yep.
was in Tennessee, and he was about to make a speech about the social injustices that the poor people in this country, including poor people in this country, face. That's when they killed him. Like he since 1950s, this guy has been the face of the civil rights movement. You're not killing him, and now you're killing him when he's already had the voter rights passed and he has had the Civil Rights Act passed. Why did you kill him then? Because he starts speaking the truth. When did they kill Malcolm? Malcolm comes back and he's like, I want to work with white people. I'm willing to work with white people, with poor, disenfranchised white people. And I'm going to use Islam as my banner. And I'm going to unify these people, all these people, under the banner of Islam. That's when they kill Malcolm X. And that's the thing that most people don't understand. It's there. It's not Malcolm versus Martin.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, in my humble opinion, Malcolm has had a more lasting impact. Yeah, they gave you the Civil Rights Act, but black people are still disenfranchised. They can't still really vote. They're still suffering. You know what movements were inspired by the works of Malcolm X? This little
What?
organization that started out in Oakland, California, called the Black Panther Party
Yeah.
by college PhD college students at Berkeley named Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale.
Yeah.
And you know what most people, when you ask them, oh, what's the Black Panther Party? Obviously, हमारे जो Pakistani
वो मूवी पे चले जाते हैं
Black Panther. Yeah, great movie by the way.
फौरन.
Wakanda forever. But the thing is, Black Panther movement in the United States was what they noticed, like the way पाकिस्तान में कराची में जो शिया जो वो बने हैं आपका, and actually the Shias of Pakistan can relate to this. And I know, like, if you have anyone listening in Beirut and in Lebanon, they can definitely relate to this because a little party in South Lebanon took a lot
Yep.
of inspiration from this, where
Yep.
they noticed that the authorities, the police, and the government are not taking care of the rights of black people in this country. So they got training on how to properly use weaponry and guns, and they started to patrol their own streets to keep their streets clean. They started providing free meals for their students in school and providing books and supplies because they noticed that these inner cities, which are um, overwhelmingly populated by African American and Latin
Right.
American kids, are not getting the same resources that the white kids are getting in your rich white neighborhoods, like in modern day Saratoga, for instance, or Mountain
Saratoga.
View.
Yeah.
Yeah, where these rich kids are doing a lot better, but our kids are suffering. You talk to most people, like even in the U.S., you ask them, "Oh, what do you think of the Black Panther movement?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's the black version of the KKK." No, it's not. It started out as a self-defense and self-reliant movement. That's what Malcolm X inspired.
Yep.
So you tell
So,
me who won.
do you think? Do you think a but there were two opposing, I would say, strategies, right, by both of these
There
men,
was
right?
so, and actually, to be honest with you, if you look at it in grand scheme of
And
things,
they did disagree with one another too.
they did, but they also did have a lot of mutual respect for each other. And and Dr. King played it very nicely, if you think about it, because what Dr. King did is he's like, "Do you want to deal with that guy? He's my alternative."
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
but what people don't realize is Dr. King, like, people are like, "Oh, you just turned the other cheek." No, there was actual, you know, self defense or civil disobedience, right? One of the works I would highly recommend people read is the works of Emerson and Thoreau, and I think it's Thoreau's on civil disobedience, where he was a conscientious dissenter. Someone like Dr. King, right? He's like, yeah, fine, I'm not going to slap you, I'm not going to fight you back, but I'm going to occupy this land. The famous sit-ins, right, where they sat there on the stools of these restaurants and these occupied these tables without ordering anything. Where they the Montgomery bus boycotts, where
Yep.
they use political capital, and yes, you can say technically they didn't fight, but they did fight. That is a fight. That's an economic fight.
Hmm.
That's you sitting there and refusing. What are you doing? What you're trying to do is you are telling the authority, I am not recognizing your authority. You are not a legitimate authority. And if you attack me, you are the aggressor. And let the
The
world
thing,
see.
I think that was the difference, right? Because
Mhm.
if anyone says that Dr. King was not confrontational, I think that's a joke because
That is that is very confrontational.
I know he went to jail. He was branded as this troublemaker
Mhm.
by various news outlets and
The
people in.
FBI had an open file on him and Malcolm X.
Exactly. So if there was, the only difference I would say is Malcolm was of the school of thought that he wouldn't turn the other cheek. He would be like, okay, you want to hit me, then you're gonna get hit back.
Yeah, exactly.
And what do you
And
expect from a person whose father was lynched? I mean,
yeah.
come on.
And the thing is, to me, I don't like, if you ask who was right, I don't think there is an answer of who was right.
No, yeah.
You need both. Sometimes you need to be, unknowingly confrontational. Sometimes you need to fight back.
Where do you see you know Malcolm X's legacy? You already talked about the Black Panther Party, but I think just looking forward now, I think with the problems that we've had, and also we've just talked about BLM almost kind of like self imploding at this point, which
Mhm. I
is a
think,
sad thing, right?
yeah.
Because a lot of
One of
hopes were attached to that particular movement. So where do you see Malcolm X's impact now going?
I see his impact within the African American Shia movement here, the Black Shias of America. What most people do not know, Malcolm X's grandson was Shia, Shahid Al-Hajj Malcolm Shabazz.
Malcolm Shabazz, yes, that's true.
Yes, and I have a picture of him on Facebook with him, and I, was in contact with him right before his shahadat.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, I was, yeah, yeah, and he was actually going to Iran to study in Qom.
He was. Wow.
Yes, and that's why they. So he was initially trying to go from, I think, from JFK, and they stopped him because he was trying to go to Iran. And they're like, "Why are you going? I mean, you're only the grandson of the most controversial African American leader in the history. Why do you want to go to the one country that's causing all the trouble for us?"
Exactly.
So then he was trying to go through Mexico, and then unfortunately, an altercation happened where he was killed in Mexico. And Sheikh Jafar Muhibullah, the resident alim of Austin, is one of the people who brought him towards Shia Islam.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I think we have to do a separate discussion on Islam and also just Shia Islam. I think here in the United States, I think
exactly.
very less gets to be discussed about that.
Mhm,
A lot of it is kind of like engulfed in this discussion that we've just had about Malcolm X and
mhm.
Nation of Islam. I think there's a lot of other, like, there's a huge movement also taking place at this point outside of this, right?
Exactly,
Under the the watchful eyes of these people.
exactly.
So
One of the things, if I may, I think
yeah, yeah,
one of
absolutely. Go
the
ahead. Go
issues
ahead.
that we deal with, and I think a great example of this, and no disrespect to Dilaver Sayed, great guy, okay,
Hmm.
but is this immigrant a model minority version of Islamic political interaction and and political leadership? In my opinion, why are the immigrants, these uncles who came here in the 80s and 90s, why do they get to lead these conversations?
Yeah.
Talking to Sheikh Hussein Makki of Orlando, not Orlando, sorry, of Colorado, Denver, Colorado. He's doing his PhD, by the way, in education. I think it's a very important thing to do. I was talking to him about this a while back that we need indigenous leadership, and one of the things that and this is an honor for me. He was like, "You would be one of those leaders," because
Yeah.
the thing is, what we need are this generation of American Muslims to understand, and Muslims in general. We need to know our history, and African American Islamic history is part of our history. As Muslims,
Absolutely.
we need to learn it and we need to own it.
Own it. Yeah. Absolutely.
And whenever we're making decisions in our masjids, right? How many times are we catering to the converts? in our community, right? And that this is part and parcel of this, right? I know people. For instance, I'll give you an example. Idara Jafri, one of my close friends, he's in DC, and he told me this that
Maryland,
the
right? This
Maryland,
the
yes,
that yeah.
Maryland, Virginia, yeah. And so his wife is he's over there, and he went to a barber, I think a Puerto Rican barber. And it turns out the guy was Shia. He's like, oh, why don't you go to this masjid here?
Ida Jafri, yeah.
Idara Jafri. He's like, no, I go to this African American indigenous Muslim mosque because the Idara Jafriya people, when we ask them, hey, can you do a program for us in English? And this is nothing against, actually, no, this is against Idara Jafriya. This is something I hope if their leadership is watching this, I hope they learn from this. They
Yeah.
told them, yeah, you guys can do this in the basement. I'm like, why
Right.
why? Like,
Yeah.
you
But
are
that's the
making,
yeah.
why
It's a
do
sad,
you,
sorry,
yeah,
so sorry state of affairs. I think.
it is a very sad and sorry state of affairs. And this goes back to our conversation earlier where the immigrant Muslims, because they're like, oh, just pay your immigrant tax and then you do whatever you want. And it's like, but most of these immigrants have no idea. Like, I know this is focused more towards like the Pakistani Muslims in Pakistan or India or wherever, but they see here don't know about Malcolm X. I mean, यहाँ पे I'll give you example. आपको पता है LA में there's a Masjid al-Rasul, a Shia in African American masjid in the
No.
inner city in South Central Los Angeles, and then they have another masjid here in Houston in the Fifth Ward. Fifth Ward is basically you can call like equivalent of like Richmond, California,
Hmm.
or like East Oakland. So
Right.
very, and it's also called Masjid al-Rasul. And I've asked people at IEC Houston, I'm like, oh, aap jo hai, you're doing these Al Quds rally and then you're doing the Sheikh Nemar rally. These are great. Or, even everybody's favorite African Sheikh, Sheikh Zakzaki, Ibrahim Zakzaki, may Allah
Yeah.
lengthen his
His
life and,
life.
protect him. And he is a
Absolutely.
true leader, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'm like, आपके यहाँ पे जो African American Shias हैं, आपने कितनी बार वहाँ पे उस मस्जिद पे गए हैं? They don't go. They don't even know. They're like, oh, there's a Shia masjid here.
I think a lot of this, I think, will hopefully, and this is me hoping, will
Mhm.
resolve itself once the leadership changes in this country of these,
But that's the thing.
areas.
We
लेकिन ये
need
लोग छोड़ेंगे नहीं
वो
मसला ये है
छोड़ेंगे
ये लोग
again.
ये they're
Again,
gonna
the
hang on
same
to
thing
it.
goes to the whole. You go tell them, hey, buddy, you're doing this wrong. You're running the masjid wrong. वो आपको झापड़ मार के जो है निकाल देंगे.
लेकिन अब कब हमेशा तो नहीं रहने सकते ना ये लोग तो कभी ना
Yeah,
कभी तो जाएंगे ये
and
लोग
that's
one way
that's
or the
where
other.
this is my focus. So you asked me what is the legacy of Malcolm X? I would say it's not indoctrinating, but educating our future generations about people like Malcolm X and the history of Malcolm X. And earlier, you said there's a lot of Muslim heroes. To be honest with you, growing up as a kid, I remember learning about Malcolm X when I was like 10. Before learning about Malcolm X, because even in school they didn't talk about him. My Bobby told me
Yeah.
about him. The you had black kids had Dr. King, white kids they have every single white president that ever was. You
Reagan.
know,
They
Reagan,
have Reagan.
yeah, Hispanic kids had like Cesar Chavez and all these folks. I was like, as a Muslim, I have nobody to relate to. Then I learned about this black guy who became Muslim and he literally shook America to its core. I was like, that's my leader.
Yeah,
And
and rightfully so.
he was, I mean, again, this is why I said earlier, his story, he reminds me of Hazrat Hur, right? Is because of that, where he went through his period of ignorance, but when it came to recognizing the truth, just like Hazrat Hur, he had again conscious of crisis, right? You're seeing a
Hmm.
leadership, you're seeing an injustice. What do? And just like Hazrat Hur ibn Yazid al-Riai, who said to Shimmer and to Omar bin Saad that, adios, I'm going to go with Imam Hussein because you guys are the usurpers and the tyrants and you are unjust and you're causing all this, fitna. Malcolm X, he was the most powerful person. He was the spokesman for the Nation of Islam. They gave him a car, a home. They took care of his he got monthly stipends. He said no to all of that and said, "No, I'm going to stand up against you because you're being unjust."
Yeah,
So you see how
absolutely.
he there's the Hazrat Hur aspect in that, and the redemption of this guy who, as a young man, was a prostitute and a gambler, and went to jail for having extramarital relationships with a white woman.
Yeah,
Now he is the most respected American Muslim. If you ask me who is the greatest American Muslim, I would say Shaheed Malcolm X,
and
without a
hard to
doubt. With
argue. Yeah, hard to argue. Hard to
bring me
argue on
anyone
that.
better.
People might say Muhammad Ali, but he's a different hero. I think
I
I
mean,
think
he's
he's a
a
different
hero, but here's the thing: who was the hero of Muhammad Ali?
exactly. So there you go, right?
There is no, without Malcolm X, there is no Muhammad Ali. Without Malcolm X, a lot of our indigenous African American and Latin American and white American sheikhs, people like Sheikh Jafar, people like Sheikh Osama Abdul Ghani, people like Sheikh Hussein Makki, and others.
Even Sheikh Nuruddin, I think he's
Sheikh
he's
Nuruddin,
heavily
yes,
he's very inspired by him.
these people were inspired by this black guy who died in 1965 speaking the truth.
Exactly.
To me, he is a shaheed, and I mean, and I know a lot of Pakistanis, they have an issue like, oh, kyun keh rahe ho, shaheed kyun keh rahe ho? No, he is a shaheed.
I think Pakistanis can stop with the Shaheed lecturing when they can call anybody in the
Yeah,
political sphere who dies
yeah,
a
and
Shaheed. So that's
where
just
this guy literally was a shaheed who died for his principles of Islam, of
for
true
his
Islam,
message.
for
Absolutely,
his message.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I think one
and
thing I would really appreciate you would do
mhm.
is provide me the links of the book, the
Oh yeah,
movie,
definitely,
the
definitely.
references that you've
It's
made. I want to
yeah.
add
So
that to the description here.
his book, it's called the Autobiography of Malcolm X. Very
Yep.
famous book.
I'll
Even
add
if you,
the
yeah,
the Amazon link to that
yeah,
on
exactly.
or
In fact,
Audible or something. Yeah,
any of your fans, if they've watched the original Fresh Prince of
fans.
Bel Air,
Yeah, I've seen
there's
that.
actually yeah, and there was, I don't know if you remember
There's
the
this
episode where,
episode. Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
remember
where
this
he's
episode.
like African American studies, right?
Yeah,
And he's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I've read the biography of Malcolm X 5 times, and his aunt
yeah.
goes, okay, but what have you learned from Malcolm X?
Yep. Or
And
his
that's the
his 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 aunt, right? Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah, exactly, because she was a African American studies professor.
Yes, yes, I remember that.
So
I remember
yeah,
that episode.
and to me, like it's it's really sad when I see American Muslims, especially American Muslims, right,
Hmm.
not owning Malcolm X. I'm like, hey, aapka hai kaun?
Like
Kaun?
on,
Who is your leader? Like, there is nobody like Malcolm X. Like, I inspire to be Malcolm X. I'm inspired by him. I aspire to be that man, to follow in his footsteps. Because he
wow.
wasn't a political leader, just a political leader. He wasn't just a black leader. He was a religious leader. He was a community leader. That is what, when I think of what the Imam's going to do, like, stop asking if what Iran is doing. Look at what Malcolm X did. That's what Imam's going to do.
He was the. I think it would be right to say he was the Imam Khomeini equivalent to this
He
region
was,
in
exactly.
in
He,
terms of
he,
like basically leading the change
he
instead of
was a
waiting for the change.
revolution of Islam that was needed.
Yeah, absolutely
He
agreed.
and we, I mean, to be honest with you, I think on his Shahadat, day of Shahadat, we should have majalis for him, which is in February. I think February 26th. Is
February
it
26th. Yeah,
26th? Yeah, we should have majalis for him,
or
and we
should
should
it should
celebrate his
exactly
birthday.
celebrate
We
his
sh-
birthday exactly.
and it, as I made on my Facebook status, I want to, next time I'm in New York, I am going to make it a point to visit his grave and do Surah Fatiha there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um. Anyway, I think this was very helpful and a very needed, much
Sure.
needed discussion. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Sarosh
It's always
hashtag
a pleasure.
Sarosh 2028. I think.
I can't run, so I mean, at least not for the highest political office. But inshallah, let's see. I mean, if I can just
Inshallah.
inspire, our local kids to, take ownership and get into leadership, and to be honest, pay dues to this great leader that we had and we lost.
Yeah,
And
absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know, I think
Anyone
there.
who's come to the United States like myself, I mean,
Mhm.
um, you don't have to be born here to appreciate this man, because you're now that I'm here, this is my home.
Exactly.
This was your home. This was your home when you were 8 years old, when you moved
Mhm.
here. Or people who were born here, this is their home.
Mhm.
This is now my home. Doesn't matter
Mhm.
the age, right? So if this is my home, the people over here are my people.
Mhm.
And there's no better way to own something than owning the best of it. And Malcolm X, Shahid, definitely was one of them. So
Indeed.
I'm
Indeed.
I'm proud to be here, and be able to learn about him from you and through you. I'll make it a point to increase that
Indeed.
knowledge that I want to learn,
Indeed. Inshallah.
basically have of him. So I
Inshallah.
think,
I mean, yeah.
yeah.
One last thing I just want to say. I mean, they say that we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And what a giant we're standing on the shoulders of.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think, which is why I think when you were mentioning, and this is the final thought, I promise, but which is when you were mentioning the civil rights movement, and because of that, immigrants came to the United States, right?
Mhm.
And then they are the ones who are becoming hash, like, quote unquote, apolitical, if you like.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's kind of an irony, right? Because you literally came on the shoulders of people who were political. If they had thought to
Exactly.
be apolitical, you wouldn't be here.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Or
for you to suggest, or like, people to
exactly.
suggest कि भाई सब चुपचाप बैठ के अपने immigrant tax दो is hypocritical, and also
It is.
ironic.
Exactly. And Malcolm X loved this country. He loved the people of this country, and he was a patriot.
Oh yeah,
And
100%.
he was America's biggest critics.
That's in my opinion, that's the definition of a
That's
patriot.
that is a patriot, right?
Is
Not
a patriot.
flag waving and
Chest
following
thumping,
blind chest thumping and blindly following uh,
jingoistic.
jingoistic demagogues.
Yeah,
It is to stand up and reflect on leadership that you have. And to me, I mean, I this is first I say to myself, but to any American Muslim who's trying to get into the political system in this country, Malcolm X, one of his dreams was he wanted to be the first black president. So read and learn from the great martyr,
yeah,
and learn
absolutely,
what you can and how to navigate in a political system where the odds are literally stacked against you. Because I can guarantee you, your uh, especially the immigrant kids, our lots are not as bad as the way they were for Malcolm X.
for sure, absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, appreciate it, man.
Of
This was
course,
great as always.
always a
And
pleasure.
we'll absolutely. It's a definite pleasure for me as well. Definitely, we'll have you back again for more
Inshallah.
discussions.
Yeah, definitely.
For anyone who's listening, do subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, on YouTube as well. Don't forget to leave your ratings on Spotify and Apple. It makes it easier for other people to discover the show as well. Appreciate it. We'll see you soon again. Thanks. And now, final poetic words by Sarosh. This particular work was written by him at the martyrdom anniversary of the great Malcolm X. For more works like this, follow his Instagram page, Ibn Ammar Poetry. I've left the handle in the description. Thank you.
Martyrdom, martyrdom, a hidden treasure sought by all those who profess their unrequiting devotion to God. Many yearn for it, yet only a select few ever taste its sweet nectar. But for them it is not a reward to be coveted, but a realized eventuality. Every action of theirs calculated, each word uttered with forethought. The martyrs seize their destiny. They are shining examples of truth, the beckoning hope of justice and liberty, in the audacious face of tyranny. As proclaimed in the Holy Quran, the martyr lives on, receiving sustenance from the Lord Almighty, ever more so in death than he did while he lived on earth physically. Over half a century has passed, yet we turn to this sage of social justice, demanding change by any means necessary. The greatest American Muslim, he lives on in our conversations and memories, while his enemies withered away in infamy. Salutations be to Shaheed Malcolm X today, the day of his return to the Lord Almighty. May you be blessed for your devotion for eternity.